Hi, my name is Catherine Ellis, and I am an academic advisor at Chemeketa Jamhill Valley campus. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about funding your college education. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in by sharing my screen with you and walking through a PowerPoint presentation that we have provided that goes through a variety of funding sources that are available to you as a student should you choose to attend Chemeketa. So we are going to go into some deeper detail about FAFSA, OSAC, the Chemeketa Scholars Program, the Chemeketa Foundation Scholarships, as well as outside scholarships. FAFSA is a free application for federal aid, and Chemeketa school code is 00318. Not that you have to memorize that, but when you fill out your FAFSA application, you'll have an opportunity to add a number of schools that you plan to attend, and those schools will then in turn receive your FAFSA information. The FAFSA is one of those funding sources that you're going to need to complete every year. It always opens up on October 1st, so it's really important to fill that out as close to October 1st as possible, as some of those funding sources are limited and are on a first come, first served basis. We're also going to go into some detail about OSAC, which is the Office of Student Access and Completion. And through Access, this is where you can fill out the ORSA application, the Oregon Promise, and a whole slew of additional scholarships. And then obviously we'll jump into the Chemeketa Scholars, Foundation Scholarships, and outside scholarships. But let's jump right into the FAFSA. First of all, who's eligible to complete the FAFSA application? Anyone who is a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen have the opportunity to fill out the FAFSA application. Some of the things that you're going to need in order to complete that FAFSA application, students under the age of 24 and their parents will need a FAFSA ID and password. And you can complete that FAFSA ID and password by just going to fsaid.ed.gov. And the screen is going to look something like this. You're going to go ahead at this point and you're going to create a FAFSA ID and password. One of the biggest issues that our students struggle with is remembering those usernames and passwords. So please, once you've completed those, write them down, plug them into the notes in your phone, do something to where you're going to be able to have access to that username and password, because you will need that every year you plan to attend college, because you will have to fill this out. Again, every October 1st. So create that username and password and make sure that your parents also complete that username and password and create that FSA ID and have them write that down as well. Because students under the age of 24 will need to have their parents sign their FAFSA application by utilizing that FSA ID and password. So in order to complete the FAFSA application, you're going to need, obviously, that FSA ID and password. You're going to need student and parent social security numbers, dates of birth, and basic demographic information, as well as emails and tax records for the 2019 federal tax year if you're completing the 2021-2022 aid year FAFSA application. A couple of myths that we want to debunk right off the top is, first, you do not have to be a full-time student to be eligible for financial aid. You can attend half-time or three-quarter time and still be eligible for the grants and the student loans that might be offered to you as a student. The other one is applying for FAFSA isn't as hard as you might think, or it's not as hard as you might have been told by others. They have provided a lot of resource with little question marks should you have any questions, where they have drop-down menus providing you with some explanation and some processes and some tips and tools to be able to answer those questions. And the last one is oftentimes students feel like once they've completed their FAFSA application, they're completely done with their FAFSA. Typically, once you submit your FAFSA application, you receive a notification from FAFSA letting you know that you've successfully submitted your FAFSA. But it also, in really tiny print, lets you know that it's important to connect with your school's financial aid office. So FAFSA is kind of a two-step process. The first step is making sure that you submit the FAFSA application. The second step is making sure that you connect with the school that you plan to attend to make sure that there aren't any additional financial aid requirements. Every college is required to selectively choose students to verify that the information they provided on their FAFSA application is accurate and correct. So you may be required to provide some verification of income, some verification of how many people are in your household. You might have to verify that you are a high school graduate. Young men might have to verify that they actually did sign up for selective services. So here at Chemeketa, you can find those additional requirements in your My Chemeketa student portal underneath the services tab. So just keep in mind that financial aid is a two-step process. Complete the application and submit it online, and then connect with the school that you plan to attend to see if there are any additional requirements that you might need to satisfy. So this is what the FAFSA application looks like online. If you've never completed a FAFSA application, obviously you're going to click the new to the FAFSA process, and it's going to walk you through and navigate you through that application. If you are a returning student, you would log in here. And the awesome thing with the FAFSA forms is it does keep track of some of your demographic information. So once you've completed the FAFSA once, you're not going to necessarily have to put in date of birth, social security numbers, addresses, or any of that information for future years. You will just want to make sure that you do update that information if any of that does change. So when you apply for FAFSA, you are ultimately applying for 3 different funding sources. The first funding source are grants, and grants are free money, money that you don't have to pay back. The grants that you might qualify for through the FAFSA application are the Pell Grant, the Oregon Opportunity Grant, and a federal subsidized grant. Some of those grants, most of those grants are what we call need-based grants. So they do some calculation based on family size, based on income, and based on some other factors to determine whether or not you and your family qualify for those grants and that free funding source. If your income is a little higher or your family size is a little lower and you don't qualify for those grants, you will likely be offered at least some form of a student loan. Student loans are those funding sources that they're a loan. So they're money that you're borrowing that at some point or another you are going to pay back. Usually, the 2 loans that are offered to students, and again, this is based on need. So some students are going to receive more loans while some students are going to receive fewer loans. But you could be offered a subsidized loan or an unsubsidized loan. A subsidized loan is a loan that you'll receive that is interest-free until you graduate from college or you no longer attend. Whereas the subsidized loan is, let's back up. So the subsidized loan is the one you do not have to pay interest on while you're going to school. The unsubsidized loan is a loan that will accumulate interest the minute you take it out. So if you take out student loans your first term and you take out an unsubsidized loan of $2,000, that $2,000 unsubsidized loan will start accumulating interest as you attend college. And so by the time you get done, it's no longer going to be $2,000. It's definitely going to be a little bit bigger than that because it's going to be accumulating interest and kind of snowballing. So just be aware of that. The other funding source is what we call federal work study. This is an opportunity for students to actually earn money. It's a part-time job that you would have on one of our campuses or at one of our centers where you would work a certain number of hours a week, submit a timesheet, and receive a monthly paycheck. So the FAFSA application, 3 funding sources: grants, loans, and work study. So now let's move on to OSAC. OSAC is an organization, it's a state office that helps Oregonians plan and pay for college by providing scholarships and other financial aid through some mentorship and some additional informational resources. The 3 things that most of our students apply for through OSAC is ORSA, Oregon Promise, and scholarships. So ORSA is a state funding source for individuals who are not eligible to complete the FAFSA. Oregon Promise is also a state funding source for students that are choosing to attend a community college. And then the scholarships that are available, it's one easy application. Easy, I would question. It's a little time consuming, but there is an application. So one application you can complete through OSAC and potentially be eligible for a number of scholarships. They have over $10 million available to students in the state of Oregon through their scholarship program. But let's dive in and talk a little bit more about each of these individual funding sources through OSAC. The first one is ORSA. So who is eligible and what do you need to apply? ORSA, the ORSA application is very similar to the FAFSA application. So students who are not eligible to apply for FAFSA, they're not eligible to apply for those federal funds, but they're definitely eligible to apply for state funding to help pay for their college education. So if you're not eligible to apply for FAFSA due to citizenship, we strongly encourage you to fill out the ORSA application. Students and parents will also need to create an account on the OSAC website so that they can create an account ID and password as well. And they're going to need the same information as if you were filling out the FAFSA. So you're going to need your account ID. You're going to need student and parent social security numbers, date of birth, emails, those types of demographic information, as well as tax records. And so if you're completing the 2021-2022, you're going to need the 2019 federal tax forms to be able to complete this application. So Oregon Promise is also another state funding source that the Oregon legislature had approved a couple, 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago now. But you would apply through the OSAC website. It opens up in early October and it closes June 1st. It is critical that you get this Oregon Promise application through OSAC completed by June 1st in order to be eligible. So the eligibility criteria has stayed consistent all across the years, other than one key feature that we're going to talk about at the end. But who's eligible? Any recent Oregon high school grad, homeschooled, or GED grad. You have to attend a community college, and you have to attend um, by your registered start term based on your graduation date. So for our typical high school students who are graduating in June, in order to continue to be eligible for Oregon Promise, you need to begin your college experience at a community college the following September or the first fall term after you graduate in June. You do have to have a 2.5 high school cumulative GPA or higher. You have to be an Oregon resident within the last 12 months prior to attending college. And you have to have no more than 90 college credits completed, which some of you who are working through college credit now or Willamette Promise, earning some of those college credits while you're in high school, that is awesome. What Oregon Promise is basically their goal or their premise is to provide funding for students through their community college experience, which will lead up to a maximum of 90 credits. So if for some reason you are uber diligent and you complete 90 credits in your high school experience, and you want to transition into a community college, you would not be eligible for Oregon Promise if you have those 90 credits. That is typically highly, highly unlikely for most of our students. So the last thing that seems to change from year to year is the eligibility based on students' EFC. Now, an EFC is your estimated family contribution. So this is what the federal government has dictated or determined that based on income, based on family size, and based on what you've submitted through your FAFSA application, what your family could potentially contribute to your college education. So let's say that you have an EFC of $10,000. The federal government is ultimately saying your family potentially could or should be able to pay up to $10,000 of your college education. Now, that EFC to me sometimes kind of blows my mind because I'm not sure how many of us sometimes can contribute to the amount that the federal government deems as our EFC. But what we need to know about your estimated family contribution and Oregon Promise is sometimes due to funding limitations, the federal government has to put or the state government has to put a cap on what that EFC is in terms of eligibility for students. So in the past, there was no cap. Any student who met eligibility requirements, submitted their application on time, and provided all of their documentation, they were eligible and they received Oregon Promise. But because this program has become highly popular and funding fluctuates from year to year, there have been years where the state has put a cap on that EFC. So this year, any student with an EFC of $22,000 or higher were not eligible for those Oregon Promise funds. But any student with less than that 22,000 EFC were eligible. So just keep that in mind as you fill out this Oregon Promise application, that EFC requirement and eligibility does fluctuate from year to year. All right, so OSAC also is kind of the clearinghouse for statewide scholarships. You fill out one application to be able to apply for more than $10 million in scholarships. Some of these scholarships are very narrow in their focus and some are very broad. There may be some that you would qualify for and some that you may not qualify for. But what we really encourage students to do is go to that OSAC website and apply every year that you're planning to attend college. It opens up November 1st. There's an early bird submission of February 15th, but the application closes on March 1st. So you need to have all of your information submitted and that application completed by March 1st. And again, these are scholarships, and scholarships are funding sources that you do not have to pay back. So it's free money that you can utilize to help fund your school without having to have that burden of having to pay that money back. Chemeketa Scholars. So Chemeketa Scholars is a program offered to incoming high school graduates within Chemeketa's district. So anywhere from Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County. The Chemeketa Scholars is a scholarship that pays for tuition here at Chemeketa for up to 7 terms. So some of the eligibility requirements are that you have had to have attended a high school within Chemeketa's district, or if you are homeschooled, you need to reside in Chemeketa's district. You do have to have an unweighted cumulative GPA of 3.5 or higher in high school. And we take your GPA based on your first semester or first quarter of your senior year. You do have to place into reading and writing 115 and math 95 or higher. And then obviously you have to be on track to graduate high school with your high school diploma. And then once you've applied and once you've been accepted into Chemeketa Scholars program, like I said, you have to begin that fall term after you graduate. You have to enroll in at least 12 credits a term. And then you do have to maintain a 3.25 GPA that first year in order to be eligible to receive that funding through year 2. So those of you that are in high school right now and are planning to graduate in June, you would have funding available to you the following fall, winter, spring, optional summer, and then fall, winter, spring of the next year. So 2 years funding time for 7 terms. Chemeketa Scholars pays for tuition only. You as a student would be required to pay for any fees associated to each of your courses and your books. The tuition here at Chemeketa is the biggest portion of the cost for students. So your Chemeketa Scholars will take care of the tuition, and then you would be responsible for the fees and your books. If you qualify for Chemeketa Scholars, you will qualify for Oregon Promise should you fill out that application. So do fill out that Chemeketa or the Oregon Promise as well, because those Oregon Promise funds could be in place to help pay for those fees and your books. So Chemeketa Foundation scholarships. Chemeketa has over 140 scholarships that they award to Chemeketa students each year. Chemeketa Foundation scholarships, you can find that information on our public website. So I'm going to click on this link and it's going to launch you. Actually, it's not, but let's go ahead and go into Chemeketa Foundation. And from here, you're going to be able to see some additional information that talks about the Chemeketa Foundation and the 140 unique scholarships that are awarded each year. The application typically opens every January. This year it will open January 1st and it will close on April 15th. The foundation scholarships are available to our current Chemeketa students as well as any incoming students who are eligible, as long as you have an active admissions application on file. So as long as you've completed the admissions application, have received an email with a Chemeketa K number, and you have access to your student portal called your My Chemeketa, you can log into the Chemeketa Foundation scholarship application on January 4th, and you could potentially be eligible for some of those scholarships that are available. Lastly, are those outside scholarships. I know that scholarships take time and effort to complete. But I always tell students that, if you spend 2 hours on an application and you earn a $500 scholarship, if you break that down, that's $250 an hour you just earned. So although it does take time, it does take effort, it's totally worth it if you receive one or two or three of those scholarships. We encourage you to search for and complete any scholarships that you qualify for, and potentially even some of those that you may not think you qualify for. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that go unclaimed every year in scholarships. So if you're applying for some that you may question whether or not you meet the requirements for, we encourage you to apply for them because no one else might apply and you may have that opportunity to obtain those funds. Some outside scholarship places, your local high schools and community as seniors usually have a whole list of scholarships that are available to graduating seniors. We encourage you to kind of look into if you have family members who work for certain organizations that also provide scholarships. That's another great way to seek some of those scholarships. But do what you can to apply for as many of those outside scholarships as you possibly can. All right, I went through a lot of information, but I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a breakdown or an example of what a financial aid package might look like here at Chemeketa. One of the cool things is you can stack as many of these scholarships together or on top of each other that you qualify for. So let's just say that this is based on 15 credits. You've applied for financial aid, you've applied for the Chemeketa Scholars Program, you applied for Oregon Promise, and you applied for some outside scholarships. First of all, you qualify for Pell based on need. So you're going to have $2,115 approximately, because that changes from year to year. You've also applied for Chemeketa Scholars and received that scholarship. So it's going to pay for $1,425 of your tuition. You also applied for and qualified for Oregon Promise, so that's going to be $288. And then you did apply for an outside scholarship and were awarded $500. So if you add all of those scholarships and those funding sources together, you've received $4,328 per term. So tuition, fees, and books here at Chemeketa run about $2,000 a term. And if you can do the math pretty quickly, if you subtract $2,000 from that $4,328, you're going to see that there's a surplus or there's an extra $2,328 that you as the student can bank. That is your money to do whatever you wish with. Now, the mama in me would encourage you to kind of bank that money and save it should you wish to transfer to a four-year institution, because obviously the expenses are going to be significantly higher once you get ready to transfer. But those funds can be saved for future education. They can be used for living expenses. They could be used for transportation needs. They could be used for reliable technology, a laptop, internet, whatever you need in order to be a successful student. So in this scenario, in this case, this student is actually being paid $2,328 a term to go to school. Here's another example. So let's say, again, based on 15 credits, this student isn't eligible for any grants. They're only eligible for student loans. And this student wants to do whatever they can to get through Chemeketa without having any loan debt. So they've declined their student loans. But they did qualify for Chemeketa Scholars. They did qualify for Oregon Promise. And they also did some work and earned a $500 scholarship. So for this student, they have about $3,013 a term in funding available to them. Again, 15 credits, tuition fees and books, approximately $2,000 a term. So this student, even though they're not eligible for financial aid or those Pell Grants or those federal funds, they're still banking $1,013 a term. So this student as well is getting paid to go to school. And that's one of the beauties of some of these funding sources and how we can kind of pull together a financial aid package where we can stack those funding sources in a way that can benefit you as a student and hopefully provide you the funds you need to graduate with us here at Chemeketa with as little debt as possible. So if you have any additional questions for us or want to know the steps of how to get started and how to get going, how to fill out the FAFSA, what some of these funding sources might look like, please don't hesitate to connect with us. As I said, we've got Mackenzie Frazier, myself, and Claudia Gallegos, who are academic advisors here at the Chemeketa Jam Hill Valley campus. You can always email us or you can call our main line. Even though we are working remotely, we are still answering our phone. So you can give us a call at 503-472-9482. And we really look forward to connecting with you and meeting with you and helping you transition from high school to college. So definitely look forward to meeting you soon.